June meeting of the Board of Access Health Connecticut. This is Charlie Klippel. Marcin, I will let you do the various announcements, and then we'll take a roll of the board members present.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this meeting is being recorded for the minute-taking purposes, as well as for posting of the recording of the proceedings on the agency's website. This meeting is also being live streamed on the Access Health CT website. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We take attendance of the directors present, please. This is Charles Klippel present.
Okay, Paul Philpott.
Present.
Thank you. Grant Ritter.
Here.
Thank you. Dietrich Gifford. Steven Hernandez. Matthew Brockman.
Present.
Thank you. Thomas McNeil.
Present.
Thank you. Dina Berlin.
Here.
Thank you. Andrea Barton-Reeves, DSS Commissioner. Sean King from OHA. Claudio Galtieri from OPM.
Here.
Thank you. Paul Lombardo from SID.
Here.
Manisha Chutani, DPH Commissioner. And Caroline Zamberi, designee for Nancy Navarrete, DMS Commissioner.
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. If I could ask the leadership team to introduce themselves as well. James, starting with you.
Good morning, all. James Michelle, Access Health Connecticut.
Good morning, Gina Walsh, Director of Operations, Access Health CT.
Good morning, Holly Zwick, Director of Finance, Access Health CT.
Good morning, Susan Rich-By, Access Health Connecticut, Director of Legal and Governmental Affairs, and my camera does not seem to be working this morning, so my apologies.
Caroline Rouette, Director of Marketing, Access Health CT.
Good morning, everyone. Glenn Jurgen, Director of Human Resources, Access Health CT.
Good morning, Tammy Hendricks, Director of Health Equity and Outreach, Access Health Connecticut.
Thank you.
Marquise Davis, Director of IT, Access Health Connecticut.
Perfect. Is that everyone? Thank you very much. I believe Commissioner Barton-Reeves has joined us, so Marcin, if you would just note that. And I understand there are no.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I just have one technical issue. Marcin, my team is trying to transfer this call to another Teams address, and they're having a hard time doing that. Is there someone that can help them do that? Because I need to move out of the room I'm in to another one, and they can't seem to forward this meeting. Is there a block on forwarding it?
I will send you, Commissioner, the invitation and email address in an email format.
Right.
So yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
Thanks, Marcin, for doing that. I understand there are no public comments this morning. Is that
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
All right, then I would ask if there are any comments on the minutes of the last meeting, any corrections or amplifications? Any discussion? All right, hearing none, then could I have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
This is Grant. Motion to approve.
Thanks, Grant. Second?
Paul, second.
Thanks, Paul. There being no further comments on this, Charles Klippel votes yes to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Paul Philpott.
Yes.
Grant Ritter.
Yes.
Dietrich Gifford. Steven Hernandez. Matthew Brockman.
Abstain.
Thomas McNeil.
Yes.
Dina Berlin.
Yes.
Thank you. Andrea Barton-Reeves. Sean
Abstain.
King. Abstain. Okay, thank you. Sean King and Claudio Galtieri.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all. James, it is your update, please.
Good morning, all, and thank you. And welcome to our final meeting of this fiscal year. I am James Michelle, the Chief Executive Officer of Access Health Connecticut. Thank you for all your hard work and dedication this past year, and also for being here today. Before we begin, I would like to share news regarding the report recently released by the Auditors of Public Accounts of the State of Connecticut, covering the the exchange audit years of 2020 and 2021. We reviewed the results with the audit committee and sent the memo to the board a few weeks ago. We take compliance very seriously, especially the protection of consumer data. There were 6 findings in the report. All items have been addressed, and the necessary actions have been taken. The issues affected a small number of our customers primarily, involving notices mailed to the wrong address because of out-of-date contact information. I want to stress that our system was never breached by any outside entity. As I indicated a few minutes, as I just indicated, most of the breaches that were referred to in the audit report were notices that were sent to wrong addresses because customers moved and did not update their information. And the information, including those addresses, are minimal. But Susan Richby will get into more detail about that when she gives you an update on the audit items. I also wanted to share that we are in the process of choosing a platform to implement the Individual Coverage Health Reimbursement Agreement, also known as ICHRA. ICHRA is a great option for Connecticut business owners who would like to offer health insurance to their employees through Access Health Connecticut. We hope to have the platform ready for customers used by the end of the current year. Regarding our meeting today, Tammy Hendricks, Director of Health Equity and Outreach, will bring us to date on our 3rd Broker Academy. In-person classes for this year's Broker Academy took place during the first week of June at Connecticut State Capital Community College in Hartford, as well as Connecticut State Community College in Norwalk. We had 53 students in attendance. The sessions went very well, as I attended both locations on the first 2 days. Next, Susan Richby, Director of Legal Government Affairs, will review the proposed amendment to the investment policy. This amendment was discussed at the Finance Committee last week. This policy is being updated with the current titles of officers to match our current organizational structure. It is also been updated to reflect the 457 deferred plan, which did not exist at the time the policy was created. Following that, Caroline Ruette will recap the Connecticut Small Business Summit, which took place back in April 22nd in Groton. We were very fortunate to have Congressman Joe Courtney and Fran Pastor, founder and CEO of the Women's Business Development Council, as keynote speakers for this sold-out event. Next, Susan will give the audit status report that I referenced earlier. Just point out for the board, our next meeting after this will be on September 19th, 2024. Thank you all for attending this today's meeting. I will pause now for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions? If not, then Tammy, I think the floor is yours.
Hey, so much. Good morning, everyone. Tammy Hendricks, Director of Health Equity and Outreach. Really excited to present the latest updates on the recent Broker Academy class, year 3, and the program continues to grow. We did a few things differently this year, trying to make the program better and more efficient for the students. So I'll get into more details as I go through the presentation. So we started by accepting 80 students at the beginning of May, and we rolled right into the program readiness meetings. And these are weekly meetings that we hold to prepare the students for the actual in-person training. We cover a variety of topics, including reviewing the Kaplan portal, which is the most important one, teaching them how to navigate the portal that has their study guides, the videos, practice quizzes. Another session was the connection that they can get to the past graduates. So they have the opportunity to talk to past students and mentors Many of the new students coming into the program are not familiar with the health insurance industry at all. So it was really a great opportunity for them to connect with the graduates and get real feedback and suggestions from them. So we had about 5 of those meetings leading up to the in-person class. We did see a decrease in class size overall, which is to be expected. It's happened in both years previously. And the main reasons we get for students usually not showing up to class is the lack of transportation, the lack of childcare, and not being able to take off work. So those are typically the 3 biggest reasons that we get. But all in all, we had 35 students in Hartford, 18 students in Norwalk, 53 students total, still a big class, even with the attrition. The class size increased by 35% compared to last year. We saw an even bigger growth in Hartford, a 75% increase in class size in Hartford for this year. So we still experienced a lot of growth. And I'll share a few stats on the class here. Starting with gender, 77% of the class identified as female, 23% male. And it's interesting because every year we've seen this trend of the classes being majority minority female. 71% of the class were between the ages of 36 and 65. Again, many of the students have not been in school for years. We've seen this trend over the past few years of the academy. And this ties back to the importance of our program readiness meeting leading up to class. And that's why students rave about it. They requested even more of those meetings, really helping them get prepared for the class day so they're not overwhelmed on day one. 42% of the students were African American, 27% Hispanic, and 13% white. We did have smaller percentages that identified as multiracial and Asian. 65% of the students were from Hartford and Fairfield counties. And this is a big one. Students collectively were from 26 different towns, representing 6 out of the 8 counties in the state. So it really highlights the growth of the program so far. And finally, the in-person class. This class schedule was a little bit new for us. It started with a 3-day training in person, and I'm happy to report that all the students passed the class certification. And this is a really important step because you need that certificate to take the state exam. And so we scheduled all the students for the state exam while we had them in class, so no one fell through the cracks there. And the following day was a review day with the instructor on site, and this was newly added this year. And it was really important because it gave the students an opportunity to ask more questions after that class exam, review more materials while the instructor was present. The final day was new for us as well. We offered students the opportunity to take the state exam on location, virtually, of course. Some students opted for this option as they felt more comfortable taking the test in a familiar environment. As you can recall in previous years, getting the students over the hump of taking the state exam has been challenging sometimes. And so this was a great option for those students who felt more comfortable being somewhere familiar. But other students decided to go to a testing location or some have opted to take it at home in the upcoming week. So far, we've had 15 students pass the exam, which is really exciting. Lots of students have their tests coming up, so we'll continue to track that. So to wrap up here, just a huge effort from all the teams in Access Health for planning a successful week. It takes a lot of time and energy being on site all week. And thank you all for supporting this program and leading us into year 3. And so we've changed a lot of lives with the Broker Academy. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tammy. Commissioner Reese has a question for you.
I do. Thank you, Tammy. This is a really great report, and it's very encouraging. Looking at the class statistics is also very enlightening. You had mentioned some barriers to access for some people. and there are common barriers to access to many opportunities, whether it's work or education. I wondered, what options do we have within our own resources or partnering with other state agencies or other organizations to help address some of those issues, as we hear them all the time for all kinds of things.
Yeah, so now that we're in year 3 and now it's become kind of a trend, we are going to start looking to partnering with other community agencies to possibly help some of the students overcome those barriers. So my team works with over 2,200 community partners, and we will be asking around and kind of brainstorming with other agencies to see if there's anything that we can do. So thank you for that suggestion. It's something that we are going to be looking into.
I would suggest probably, especially with the childcare issue, starting with Commissioner Bai. She's got some really interesting and creative ways in which she's tried to address that. Transportation continues to be a concern. Not really sure we can go for that, but I'll give that one some thought too.
Okay, thank you so much for that suggestion.
Sure.
Other questions for Tammy?
Charlie, it's Paul. I've got one.
Yes, please, Paul.
Tammy, I'm asked, this is just a ballpark question. Assuming, a typical number of students from this year complete the exam and go out in the field, how many total brokers will we have out in the field?
Right now, I'm estimating we have over 600 brokers that are certified through Access Health. I want to say closer to 650. So with this new class, we would be approaching 700 certified brokers through Access Health.
Okay. And of the 600, how many are actively producing cases, enrollments?
That I would have to get back to
John. So Paul, can we look into that, and then we could report back to you in September, or we can send a report to the entire board before the next September board meeting?
Absolutely, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah, we have that information. We just want to make sure we're accurate with it before we give you an answer.
That's great. No problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think that would be a very useful statistic. Any further information? Any further questions for Tammy? Tammy and James, I have to say, from my perspective, this program has been a home run. It's this is something you've started from scratch, and it's fabulous to see this kind of enrollment. I think it's both good for the exchange and good for the community. So congratulations to both of you and everybody else who's been involved in putting this together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here.
All right, Susan Rich Bai, I think this is the first of a number of your agenda items.
Thank you. And I did the old quit and restart, and I got my camera to work. So hopefully you all can see me. So thanks for your patience. For the investment policy today, if you may recall, back at the April meeting, we presented some proposed amendments to the investment policy, and the board voted to have us post it in the Law Journal, the Connecticut Law Journal, as is required for 30 days of public comments. The comment period has ended and no comments were received. So I just want to highlight to everyone, number one, you should have all received a copy of the red line version so you can see what the changes are. Marcin sent it with the meeting materials. And also just to point out that the investment policy as it now stands before amended was adopted in 2012. So a lot has changed since 2012 in the organization. As James mentioned, back then, I think the organization was still figuring out what the retirement vehicles would be for employees of the exchange, as we are not state employees and don't participate in the state pension plan. So one of the items was captured in the investment policy, the 401A plan, but also since then, employees have been allowed to participate in the state's 457B deferred compensation plan. So we felt it was appropriate to add that to the investment policy, as those are employee deductions taken out of payroll, and Access Health is responsible for making sure that all of those contributions make it into the 457B plan, into our employees' accounts. And also some of the titles of directors and officers of the exchange have changed since 2012. So we also just wanted to make updates to the policy so that it reflected the current titles. So I'll leave it open if there are any questions, and then it will be up to the board to vote if they so choose. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Are there any questions about the new policy or the policy changes? If not, then could I have a motion to approve the amended investment policy as presented by Susan?
Tom
Hi,
McNeil, so moved.
Thank you, Thomas.
Second, Andre.
Second.
Okay, I'll let Marson sort out who that was for a
I believe
second.
it was Commissioner Reeves.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? If not, Charles Klippel, yes.
Thank you. Paul Philpott,
Yes.
Graham Ritter,
Yes.
Deidre Gifford, Steven Hernandez.
Yes.
Thank you. Matthew Brockman,
Yes.
Thomas McNeil,
Yes.
Dina Berlin.
Yes.
Thank you. Andrea Barton Reeves.
Yes.
Thank you. Sean King and Claudio Gualtieri.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I believe the next item is from Carolyn. So Caroline, if you would give us an update on the Small Business Summit.
My pleasure. Thank you. This is Caroline Rouette, the Director of Marketing for Access Health CT, and I am presenting to you today on behalf of John Carbone, the Director of Small Business Health Option Program and Product Development, because he is unable to be here. And it is my pleasure to share some great news with you. So the Access Health CT shop team hosted the second Connecticut Small Business Summit this spring at the Mystic Marriott in Groton. Last year, the event was hosted in Rocky Hill, so we're trying to get around the state as we continue to host this event. And the event supports the small business community in a collaborative way and brings resources and vendors all under one roof for an engaging day of workshopping and networking. This year, SHOP partnered with the Chamber of Commerce of Eastern Connecticut to leverage their connections and relationships within the small business community, particularly within that greater New London area. Next slide, please. We are pleased to share that the event was once again sold out. There were more than 225 attendees, 28 vendors, and 20 speakers. And instead of purchasing tickets, attendees were required to register to save their spot, but they were also encouraged to donate to Connecticut Food Share. And $18,000 was raised to help Connecticut residents who are food insecure, which is a major social determinant of health. Next slide,
I think
please.
you meant 1,800, not 18,000, right?
I'm sorry. My apologies. 1,800. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, James. Thank you. Big difference there. Thank you. Here's a great slide with a lot of good visuals about the great vendors and community resources who came together to support this event and provide really valuable information to attendees. Please note that there was some great cross-pollination with other CT-based resources. So I want to call your attention to Array RX, the new prescription program here in the state. There was also the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development present. CT Paid Leave was there, and more. Next slide, please. And this is a really great visual of some of the speakers as well as the panel presenters that were on site that day. And at the event, small business owners had a great opportunity to attend breakout sessions featuring experts and sharing insights about things like marketing and community impact, how health and wellness offerings can benefit your bottom line, as well as accessing capital and small business finance. The event also featured a great group of speakers, some of whom you can see in the photos here. We had Congressman Joe Courtney, Lieutenant Governor Susan Bysiewicz, Comptroller Sean Scanlon, Representative Andre Baumgartner, the Department of Administrative Services Commissioner Michelle Gilman, and as James mentioned earlier, Fran Pastore, the founder and CEO of the Women's Business Development Council. We'd also like to take the opportunity to thank our board member, Stephen Hernandez, for once again being our MC for the event. He did a really fantastic job hosting and ensuring the event ran smoothly and on schedule. Thank you very much for your help there. And we'd also like to thank all the representatives from the Chamber of Commerce of Eastern Connecticut, all of the Access Health CT staff. The shop team really is responsible for this event, but there were so many folks from the organization that were present on site either to help or just learn alongside the other small business folks there, as well as many of the speakers and vendor organizations that contributed to making the second event such a great success. I do want to call out for everybody here on the call that the speaking sessions were recorded and they have been posted to the Small Business Summit website. And so we can send that out for anybody who maybe wasn't able to join us at the event or maybe wants to, rewatch those things or share it with others. We'll make sure that you have that as a resource. And then following the summit, we also sent out a survey to attendees and received really great feedback, hearing from many that they really gained valuable insights that they can apply to their business. So thank you everyone for your help for making this event happen. Really happy with the second year and the trajectory that this is growing in. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Caroline. Are there any questions or comments?
Mr.
Yes,
Chair, for purposes of a comment, maybe as we consider, I was very happy to see the ArrayRx partnership in part of this, and I just want us to continue to think about easy opportunities for quickly getting people access to that discount card. Maybe we can consider at a future meeting whether as someone is enrolling in the QHP programs or doing open enrollment, whether there could be sort of a check-in, opt-in type program by which when they're enrolling in a qualified health plan, they're also getting the ArrayRx discount card. I don't know if there's a way we can seamlessly do that, but seems like it would be a good complement, especially with those who may be receiving subsidies to be able to afford health insurance, that when insurance doesn't cover a prescription drug or the out-of-pocket costs are higher than the discount card, that could be an option for consumers as well.
Interesting idea. James, can you give that?
Absolutely. As we develop our marketing strategy for the next open enrollment, we will incorporate that into our marketing strategy. Also, see if it's possible to include a link connection in our website during open enrollment as well. So yes, we will take that in consideration and try and include it as much as we can across all of our marketing as well as our digital footprint across this.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Just really quickly, I wanted to add that, Claudia, we do have them at our enrollment fairs. And so that's another way that we've been partnering with them. As folks get enrolled, they are present there to offer that discount card.
Yeah, no, I thought that was great. That's what precipitated the idea. How many steps between knowing about the program and getting enrolled can we remove, to make that glide path even more seamless? So thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great suggestion. Any other comments or ideas for Caroline? Caroline, thank you so much. Susan, I think we're back to you for an audit update.
I think you are. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We have a number of different items today for the audit update. As James mentioned, the audit committee met last week and we went over all of these with the audit committee, and we wanted to also go over them with the board as well. So I'm actually going to start to just mention that we have selected new auditors for the exchange. Access Health is required to solicit proposals at least once every 3 years for financial, legal, bond, underwriting, and other professional services pursuant to our enabling legislation 38A 1082A, and also pursuant to our procurement policy for contracting for personal services. In addition, as a quasi-public agency of the state of Connecticut, we also are not permitted to contract with the same person, firm, or corporation to conduct financial audits of the agency for more than 6 consecutive years pursuant to Section 1-127 of the Quasi-Public Act. So this year we were required to solicit proposals for FY24 going forward for a new vendor to provide audit services. And as we had contracted with our prior auditor for 6 consecutive years, we were not permitted to select our most recent auditors. The firm Whittlesley was selected as the new firm to provide audit services for Access Health for the new audits for FY24. Whittlesley was engaged as the audit services vendor for the first 6 years of the exchange, for any of you who may have been on the board or with us during that time period. And now I'm going to introduce the next one, the financial and programmatic audits for FY24, which will be the project that Whittlesley is starting to engage on. So every year, Access Health is required to have an independent auditor complete financial and programmatic audits of the exchange, and this is pursuant to both state and federal requirements. The federal programmatic audit looks at our program activities, including compliance with requirements for eligibility determinations for exchange programs and the insurance affordability programs, and also enrollment in qualified health plans through the exchange, and also our processes and procedures that are designed to prevent improper eligibility determinations and enrollment transactions. The financial audit is required pursuant to both state and federal requirements. The next item, I'll pause if anyone has any questions about those. So Whittlesley is just beginning work with Access Health on the audits for FY24, and the schedule is to have all of that work completed and the draft audits presented to both the audit committee for their approval and then to the board in November. So if there are no questions, I'll move on to our next item, which is a federal requirement. It is the State-Based Marketplace Annual Reporting Tool, affectionately known as the SMART. The ACA requires state-based marketplaces to keep accurate accounting of all of our activities, our receipts and expenditures, and also to monitor and report to the Department of Health and Human Services on our exchange-related activities and complete an annual report. And as I mentioned previously, to engage an independent auditor to perform the annual independent financial or programmatic audits to ensure our compliance with all of the regulations and standards. Back in 2015, CMS created an online annual reporting tool for exchanges to use and combined all of these different requirements into one easy place. The SMART has 4 components: eligibility and enrollment, the financial and programmatic audits we've been talking about, program integrity, and also finally an attestation of completion. The SMART is due on June 1st of each year for the prior year. Access Health filed its SMART for 2023 on May 31st, and we anticipate hearing back from CMS in a few months. We did not find any issues when completing our responses, and we don't anticipate any recommendations or findings. So I'll pause if there are any questions. And then next I can move on to the, as James mentioned, the state auditors of public accounts, their report that was released on May 15th for FY20 and 21. And as James mentioned, we presented this information to the audit committee last week, and we also prepared a memo last month that we sent to the board, so you all had information on these different areas. James mentioned there were 6 findings. While we take our compliance with everything, and especially data protection, very, very seriously, as you'll see as I take you through, none of these findings illustrate any major, really, deficiencies in the organization and the strength of our programs. So the first one is lack of compliance with data protection and statutory breach reporting. As we've been saying, you know, we take information security extremely seriously, and we have strong security controls and policies and procedures in place to prevent disclosure of consumer information. We hold information on a large number of consumers in our system. We have a lot of different programs, software in place, none of which are under my control, to protect our system from any hacks into the system, as James mentioned. And none of these items mentioned here refer to any kind of hacks into our system. The system has been secure and safe. These items were instances where it could be that a consumer moved, and because of the continuous coverage during the pandemic, consumers who were enrolled in Medicaid had their coverage continue even if they didn't come in and update their application. So there are a lot of instances where we had old consumer addresses, and notices may have been mailed to an address that the consumer no longer resided at, and someone else who lived there now called us because they received the notice for somebody else that didn't live there. We treat that as a breach because someone else could have, in theory, seen the information in the notice. And I just want to point out that our notices do not contain any Social Security numbers, any dates of birth. The only, other than the person's name and address, the only real identifier is a system ID number. That's not anything that any actor or anybody could use to do anything. It doesn't have their, if someone enrolls in a QHP, it doesn't have their ID number in the QHP with the carrier. It doesn't have their, Medicaid card number. None of that is contained in our system notices. We put the minimum information necessary into the notices. And I also just want to take a moment to highlight that all of these instances really only impacted either one consumer or one household, the by and large, the large majority. There was one instance where we had implemented some new software in our notice printing to try to improve the process, and there was a little defect in it. It wasn't noticing, person A, where to stop between person A and person B and person C when it was printing them in batches. So there were some notices that were combined in mailing. That impacted 160 consumers. We caught it right away. We took out the technology and we immediately notified the consumers of this. And I just want to also note that when we do notify a consumer when an instance has occurred concerning their information, they are all presented with 2 years of credit monitoring and identity theft protection at our expense, which if it was caused by a vendor, the expense is then actually passed on to the vendor whose employees may have caused it, and also with information on how to control their credit information through the 3 credit reporting bureaus. Some consumers prefer to do that. So we give them that information. And just to note, Access Health, like I believe most organizations in this business, don't actually see a high number of people actually taking out the credit monitoring. People, it is offered to them and they have 2 years of it. There is not a high take up of those offers, if you will. People may have other credit monitoring in place. They may choose to go through the credit bureaus to lock down their credit, what have you, but we don't see a lot of take up of those offers. And then the other part of this finding is that in addition to the reporting that Access Health does to the State Attorney General's office and also to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, we are also under a separate statute required to provide notice to the auditors of public accounts and the state controller. We were not originally aware of this requirement. We became aware in 2021. So since that time, we have done the required reporting to all of these various agencies. So in this audit period noted, there were only 3 items that weren't reported to those 2 additional agencies. All the rest were reported to all of those agencies. And we just want to take a moment to point out that we are constantly monitoring all of the consumer information in our system and requiring that our vendors and their employees and our employees as well, everybody is required to undergo privacy and security training annually. We require criminal background checks, just like we do for our employees, for all of the employees of vendors where there is access to consumer information. And in addition, during our last contract with T-Tech, our call center vendor. We also added some additional penalties for breaches and also added additional reporting requirements. And we are pleased to say that those instances of human error have decreased. So we're very glad about that. And we're always, looking for new ways. Obviously, human error is human error, but we're always doing everything we can to eliminate that possibility. So I'll pause if anyone has any questions on that item. If not, I will move on. The next item was lack of controls over eligibility and coverage overrides. There are two different types of overrides that are used in our system: coverage and eligibility overrides. Eligibility overrides deal with actual eligibility for a program, whether it be Medicaid or CHIP, which are all handled by the Department of Social Services, or enrollment or in a qualified health plan and potentially financial assistance, which would include Covered Connecticut. Those are handled by Access Health staff if it deals with eligibility. The other type of overrides that are needed are coverage overrides, and those occur probably much more frequently than the eligibility overrides, and those have to do with the dates, the effective dates of coverage. Sometimes there are instances where a consumer may not have submitted the required verification documents, or they had some challenges verifying their eligibility for a program, their information, their income, what have you. And our staff and the call center staff, will work with them, and there may need to be a change in the effective date of the coverage. So those are the other types of overrides. So the call center, their escalation team only, their high-level team is only permitted to do the coverage overrides where a date change might be needed. Sometimes someone had trouble enrolling, there's some other issue, and a date change is needed. That's what comes up most frequently. We do run regular reports to look at the coverage and eligibility overrides to make sure that we are, keeping proper eye on everything. We run monthly reports now. And also we have the call center work with their staff to do quality assurance on their escalation team's work. And we also have a quality assurance department within Access Health who also is regularly looking at our customer resolution team workers' work to make sure that what they are performing is appropriate. The workers are required to document what if they do an override in our enrollment system or our CRM. And for the audit period, the auditors noted that there were 3 instances from the sample sent to them for overrides that didn't have the proper documentation. And I just want to point out that 2 of those 3 were actually done by DSS workers. They were for a Medicaid program. As I mentioned, Access Health is not permitted to do any overrides for DSS programs. And then the one other instance actually was not an override. It was included in the sample accidentally. Someone had literally touched the override button, but then they weren't performing an override. They had hit the button by accident, did not perform an override. And we made the auditors aware, but they still kept this in as it was in the sample that we sent to them. So I will pause if anyone has any questions here. Okay, the next item is weakness in purchasing processes. The auditors looked at a number of different transactions, and also just to point out, and I think James mentioned this audit is for FY 20 and 21. So in some cases, they were looking at transactions that were 4 years old, and during the beginning of the pandemic, when we switched to all online for all of our, purchasing and all of our systems to do with finance. A lot of it had been online, but we really transitioned, as most organizations did at that time, because of the remote work that came into play. So some irregularities in purchasing were noted by the auditors about the timing for signing purchase orders, documentation for certain purchases, and about obtaining multiple quotes, and also the processes for credit card purchases. I just want to point out, Most of the findings for the credit card purchases are for a very small number of purchases. They represent 1 to 3% of the total credit card purchases during that time. And they actually were the same transactions that the auditors wrote up in multiple different ways, and they were not violations of Access Health's policy. Some of these credit cards are primarily used by staff members for travel. In some instances, they are used for other needed purchases for the agency. So some of what the auditors noted was just that our policy itself didn't completely spell out what we all were doing in practice as far as when a purchase order was required or a W-9. Obviously, those things would not be required for travel purchases, but were required for non-travel purchases, and expense reports were only required for travel purchases. So we are always reviewing our accounting policy and procedure manual to make sure that the language in there accurately reflects what our policy is. And the most important thing is to make sure that we have strong financial controls in place, which we do. So in any instance where there may have been some, I think there was one instance where documentation could not be located. And as I mentioned, this was during the early COVID period. We are working to make sure that everybody maintains proper documentation for all of these purchases. So I'll pause if anyone has any questions. Riveting. I will move on to the next item is inadequate documentation of criminal background checks. We are required under the ACA to have a navigator program and to make grants to navigator organizations. So each year we select, depending on what we view as the needs for community outreach, we determine the number of navigator organizations that we're going to select, and we go through a competitive process to select our navigator organizations. Access Health has put into place a requirement of our navigator organizations that they have all of their employees that work as a navigator for Access Health to have passed a criminal background check. I think I mentioned this earlier. Access Health requires this for all of our employees. We require it, for the call center. We also require it for the navigator organizations. During this audit period, there was one record for one employee. The employee actually had passed a background check. The organization just could not locate the documentation to send to us showing that the person had passed the background check. We don't actually want to maintain the information on the background check. We just want the organizations to run them themselves and to certify that they have passed the background check. So going forward, we have checked for FY 22, 23, and 24. The organizations have maintained all of the records showing the personnel completing the background checks. And starting in FY 25 with our new navigators that we are in the process of selecting, we are going to be requiring a written certification each year so that we ensure that we have all of that documentation in place. So I'll pause again. Okay. Item number 5 is inadequate overtime monitoring. We have some of our staff are hourly in certain departments, and they work, a regular work week, and periodically they are asked and encouraged and allowed to work overtime. Our customer relation team is the group that primarily falls into this bucket. There are instances throughout the year around open enrollment, perhaps during the past year with the continuous running of the Medicaid unwind groups each month. We want to ensure that we don't have any backlog of escalated consumer issues that come up to our team. So sometimes we ask our team members to work overtime so that we keep that number really low so that we get back to consumers and we address their issues right away as soon as we can. Also, and especially, this was another item that especially came up during the past year with the unwind. Tammy and her team have scheduled enrollment fairs around the state. Usually they're primarily during open enrollment. During the past year, we've been having them every single month to help people who are going through the Medicaid unwind redeterminations. We ask our customer resolution team to help us staff these fairs around the state so that we have enough personnel at the fairs. The fairs are usually held sometimes in the evening or on a weekend because you want to hold them at a time when people, as we've been talking about, the challenges people have in coming to programs, we want to make it as easy as possible to help them enroll. So we don't do it, at 10 o'clock on a work day. We do them usually in the evenings and on the weekends. So the customer resolution team is often asked to work overtime to work for these fairs as well. Our policy requires for the staff that they have their overtime pre-approved, and it also, as a secondary process, it gets approved every 2 weeks when the biweekly payroll is submitted. The managers have to approve it there as well, but we require pre-approval. In some instances, we were unable, all of the overtime was pre-approved, but as it was going back almost 4 years, we were unable to locate some of the documentation for the pre-approval of the overtime. And in one case, I believe it was a difference of opinion between Access Health about what the pre-approval said for the time period versus what the auditors felt. But we will always work to improve our processes and make sure that we have the proper records so that we show all of this pre-approval of overtime worked by non-exempt hourly employees. I'll pause if there are any questions.
Susan, do we know how many people this impacted?
I
How many
believe
approvals?
it was like 3 or 4 instances. It was a really small number over. I forget the percentage of, as I mentioned, they are asked to work overtime during a number of months throughout the year. And there were literally like 3 instances. And I think it was like $400 or $600 of overtime that was in question. It wasn't in question that we couldn't locate the documentation for the pre-approval. Excuse me, James. So as you can see, a very small percentage, and really just maintaining the documentation. That was the issue. The last item is lack of compliance with statutory reporting requirements. We have processes for timely filing of our annual and quarterly reports that we are required to do under the Quasi-Public Act, Section 1-123. And we also make regular financial reports to the Finance Committee and the Board of Directors. And that includes information, as you all recall, on the value of our reserve funds in the account, any interest earned, and where those funds are invested. All of our reserve funds are maintained in an account with the State of Connecticut Treasurer's Short-Term Investment Fund, also known as the STIF. We do not actively invest or trade our reserve funds in any particular instruments. The investment policy requires annual and semi-annual reporting on the investments, which has been done through our regular reporting that we do to the Finance Committee and the board. We just were not calling it investment report. The auditors noted that we should be calling it the investment report. So we actually started this past year. We have started calling it, you'll notice for anyone who's on the Finance Committee, and when we also report to the board, that when we report on this information on the reserve funds, we are now calling it the investment report. So it is the value of the funds, where they are invested, the interest earned, and also how many months of operating funds are in there. And we've always been reporting that as well. And I believe there was just a question with the auditors about the timing of when we filed some of our the annual reports pursuant to 1-123. We do have to wait until we start working on them right away after the fiscal year ends. But as I mentioned, our financial audits are completed in November. So we do have to wait till that information comes forward till we have everything to package it in the financial report. And I also do want to note that 1-123, while it mentions the quarterly and the annual reports required, it does not specify a time period of when they need to be filed. So I will pause if there are any questions.
Any questions for Susan about the very comprehensive report here. This is helpful. I'm glad we went through this. I think it's quite helpful to understand where our audit issues are and how they've been resolved. So thank you for that. Commissioner Reeves?
Thank you. Susan, I don't have a question for you, more so than, I guess, echoing what Charlie just said, which is I really appreciate it. I think what's disconcerting is the disconnect between what appears in the report and the explanations that you provide. Right? It sort of leaves this impression that things are much more, I guess, serious and not managed as, you know, and obviously that's not the case from what you're describing. I don't know if there's a way to have more conversation with the auditors around that, because it does leave a very public impression about one thing. When we actually get down to the details, it's another. I was just curious about your thoughts around that, or if we just continue to address it as they're raised the way that you are doing now.
We do have, you know, while the auditors are doing their report, as many of you who work at state agencies may be aware, they do present, you know, draft findings to us. In numerous instances, sometimes something they may present as a draft recommendation. Once we discuss it with them further, they remove it. And some of these items, even though we present this information that I presented to you today, their auditors, from their perspective, it's black and white, and so they will leave the finding in. If anyone has the interest or time to read the state auditor's report, you'll see that they go through their controls and their findings, and then they give the agency an opportunity to respond. So all of this information is in our responses in the report. So, I mean.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Susan? Susan and James, with your indulgence, and I always hate to do this because I always winds up cutting Susan off, but we have an executive session coming up, and I'd like to keep us on schedule as best we can for that. So would you be okay if we omitted those two next items? And James, maybe at the end of the meeting, we could have a little discussion of the future agenda items.
Sure, absolutely. Again, actually, there's no ACA policy update this year. There's no update this year. Susan has sent a note to the board back in May, and there's nothing to add to it. And the future agenda items, they're just there for reference. I think there are 3 items that we've mentioned to the board in the past. So there's not much more to add other than to keep it in front of the board, so the board knows that we are working on these 3 items actively to move us forward as an organization. That is it.
Okay, I really appreciate that. And again, Susan, thank you very much for the report. I think very important for us to hear it. So I appreciate that so much.
Charlie, one quick follow-up to Susan's report. Now, we met with the Real Estate and Insurance Committee 2 weeks ago, just a committee to kind of give them the same presentation that Susan just presented to the board. Mm-hmm. We have another meeting tomorrow, a public forum with them as well.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, Marcin, I think you have distributed a separate link for this executive session. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. Hopefully everybody has it. If they don't, would you please just, or actually Marcin just recirculated it, I believe, so we should all have it by now. Could I have a vote to enter into a executive session to discuss some personnel matters?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Tom McNeil, I second.
Thank you, Tom. Any discussion? If not, Charles Klippel, yes.
Thank you. Paul Philpott.
Yes.
Grant Ritter.
Yes.
Deidre Gifford. Steven Hernandez. Matthew Brockman.
Yes.
Thomas McNeil.
Yes.
Dina Berlin.
Yes.
Andrea Barton Reeves.
Yes.
Sean King. And Claudio Gualtieri.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. So we will leave this line and I'll see you all in a moment over on the other link that Marcin has sent us. Thank you.
And just a reminder that you'll need to come back to the meeting after the executive session.
We'll come back to this one.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you. Marson?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm here.
Okay. All right. We are rapidly losing quorum, so we need to do this quickly.
Mhm.
Do we have a quorum, Mr.
Do we have a
Chair?
quorum now?
We need to have 6. I'm just counting
6
right now.
voting.
I'm just counting right now. Yes, we do. We have 7, I believe, at this point. So we do have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. So very quickly, we have had an executive session to talk about the renewal of James Michelle's contract. And I would ask,
Excuse me, we need to vote first to come back into the meeting.
oh, I'm sorry. Can I have a,
Sorry.
can I have a vote to, a motion and then a vote to come back into this meeting?
Mrs. Grant, so moved.
Thanks, Grant.
Seconded, Tom McNeil.
Thank you, Tom. Charlie Klippel, yes.
Thank you, Paul Philpott,
Yes.
Graham Ritter,
Yes.
Deidre Gifford, Steven Hernandez,
Yes.
Matthew Brockman, Thomas McNeil,
Yes.
Dina Berlin,
Yes.
Andrea Barton Reeves,
Yes.
Sean King, and Claudio Galtieri.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder, Susan. And to pick up the thought, we spoke about the renewal of James Michelle's contract as the CEO of Access Health. And I would ask for a vote from this board authorizing the Human Resources Committee to enter into a conversation and negotiation with James regarding the renewal of that contract. We will sort of, I think we've talked about sort of taking this in a couple of steps. So, but the first step is that one. So if I could ask the committee members if there's any discussion on that point. Otherwise, could I get a nomination authorizing the Human Resources Committee to enter into this conversation?
This is Paul, so moved.
Thank you, Paul. Second?
Tom McNeil, I second.
All right, Tom, thank you very much. Again, any discussion on the point? Otherwise, I would ask for a vote. And this is Charles Klippel, yes.
Thank you, Paul Philpott,
Yes.
Graham Ritter,
Yes.
Deidre Gifford, Steven Hernandez,
Yes.
Matthew Brockman. Okay, thank you. Matthew Brockman, Thomas McNeil,
Yes.
Dina Berlin,
Yes.
Andrea Barton Reeves,
Yes.
Sean King, and Claudio Galtieri.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for the executive session as well. We will follow up on the counsel that you have provided in that session. I think that leaves only a vote to adjourn this meeting. So is there any question or comment about adjourning this meeting? And if not, could I have a nomination, a motion to do so? Thank you.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Second?
Seconded.
Thank you very much. Charles Klippel, yes.
Thank you, Paul Philpott,
Yes.
Graham Ritter,
Yes.
Deidre Gifford, Steven Hernandez,
Yes.
Matthew Brockman, Thomas McNeil,
Yes.
Dina Berlin,
Yes.
Andrea Barton Reeves,
Yes.
Sean King, and Claudio Galtieri.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. We will follow up. So
Yep.
talk to you all later. And again, thank you for your support.
Take care. Bye now.
Bye-bye.